All right, we're COMP123, and guess what? This is week 11, lesson 11. We're coming towards the end, which is actually a good and a bad thing, right? Good thing is coming towards the end of the requirements here. Bad thing is I'm going to be boo-hoo because I won't be seeing you guys for the summer, right? And you guys will be doing whatever you're going to be doing in the summertime. I'm just going to pass this little sign-in sheet, if you can do this. For today, and I'll probably do another little sign-in for tomorrow, which will be a separate sheet. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, so again, we covered last week and the week before, we covered UI, right? And the basics of UI, right? So if I was to remind you what we kind of put together, and I mean, I can go back, let's go and look at COMP123 Lesson 10 Part 2, which is last week for a second, really quickly. If you remember, we put together this little picture box form, right? This is the kind of form put together from last week. And I was able to cycle through the picture box and change from English to Spanish, right? So that takes care of some of the requirements for your picture box. You won't need to do a gallery like this. But the English to Spanish stuff, it definitely takes care of because we're going to be doing English to French. So that's that part. And that was really all we did in Part 2. Hopefully you remember all that. It's okay if you don't, because we're going to kind of do some more stuff, practice more today. And it's going to be very similar to what we've already done, so that way it gives you another chance to watch certain things. So here's what we're going to look at. Let's look at Lesson 10 Part 1. So the first thing we did when we first learned UI, right? And again, if you were to look at this piece, and I'm just going to see if this is the first part of it, is this, right? We did this color form option. We click on the show button, and then we have these options here: blue, green, pink, and so on, right? And then we do an accept, and it would change the color of the form, right? Remember that? So those are really the two forms we built. Did we build any other forms other than that? No. So there's going to be some complexity on assignment number 5 and 6. I keep saying 5. In my mind, it's 5 because really it's only supposed to be 5, right? We added an extra assignment in there 4, and it screwed me up, right? It's an optional assignment. By the way, who did the optional assignment? You didn't have to if you didn't want to. Kinda did the option. You get some part marks, right? If you kinda did the optional assignment and to help you out, then you'll kinda get part marks, right? For those people who did it. Even if you didn't do assignment number 4 well, you're still going to get part marks. It's still going to help you. It's not going to hurt you in any way, right? So that's good if you did it. If you didn't do it, that's kind of weird. It's good, only because you lose marks for no reason, right? It's just, makes no sense. Okay, so we did a couple of those things. We didn't really talk about input, though, at all. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about input, but this is going to also help you for tomorrow. Tomorrow's exam, just to let you know, I'll tell you what it's going to be. You're going to have to generate a random number in a box, and maybe a bunch of boxes. It's going to have a theme. You're going to have to follow instructions on the form. Say, put this label here, make the form this size, change the font size to this, drop this control over here, double-click this, and it'll do this. And that's what everything that we've been looking at, we've been talking, that's stuff we're going to be doing. I'm not going to make you do something we haven't done, or even things that I'm introducing today, right? I'm not going to do that because it makes no sense. It's not fair, right? But what I will do is practice today. Some of the same things we did today do today, we've already done. Yeah.
You said generate a random number from like a text box, or you click a button?
Click a button and then something like that. Something easy. So it's going to be easy to do, right? It's not going to be, again, but also it's going to be a little bit of form making. So you have to make the form, make it look a certain way. That's part of UI building. And then some interactivity. Click a number, click a button or two, and then it does stuff in the actual boxes, right? That's what it's supposed to do. So it shows you how you link the front end, the UI, to the back end code, which is, kind of in a very simple way. Really, at this point, I want you to think about a form as a class, right? So again, even if I pull up a new project, let's just do this today as a new project. We're going to do a new Windows form application. We're going to call this, of course, COMP123, and it's Lesson 11, Part 1, right? Probably this will be the only part. Maybe I'll do Part 2 if we break this lesson up. I'm also going to share this one on GitHub, which I will make available to you. Again, for tomorrow's test, you'll have access to GitHub. You'll have access to your book. You'll have access to doing stuff online. However, what I'd ask you to do is, you don't have a lot of time again from that perspective. So, the more you practice, the better you'll be. All right, so, okay, let me try this out here. So it's COMP123 and it's lesson 11, part 1. Okay, and I'll just grab this little GitHub thing and go into here, and we'll go into Team Explorer, changes, created new VS C# Windows Form project. Okay, and again, if you notice these Windows Forms projects, they're all the same. You start off with a form, right? And some of you may say, well, what about if there's any other meaty stuff to do, right? Like if I want to make another kind of application, is it possible? Could I do it? Absolutely. There's all kinds of stuff. But you got to start somewhere, right? And this is where we start. We start with Windows Forms. Actually, if you do anything with .NET, ASP.NET in the future, and that may be a course or some kind of thing with it, it'll be very similar to this. Once you learn this kind of stuff, then ASP.NET will be a little easier for you to learn as well, because the Microsoft uses the same functionality or methodology. Not that ASP.NET is something that we do these days as often as ASP.NET MVC5 or MVC4. You'll see those things more common than anything else. Okay, so we got our form. What is it, just as a review? What do we do when we first get our form? I'm just going to go to my Solution Explorer here. First thing we do, we rename the form, always. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do tomorrow on your exam. Rename the form to whatever it's going to be. How do I rename the form? Right-click here on the form, right? That's how you rename the form. When you right-click on the form, you're going to go to Rename down here, and then from there you can name it whatever you like. And today we're going to make this an input form, because we're going to do some inputs and stuff like that. So input form, enter. It's going to ask you, hey, do you want to do this, and do you want to propagate these changes, blah, blah, blah. You're going to say yes. Okay, next thing. I don't like my form, the title bar of my form. How do I change that up? How do I make it so that it's different? What do I do? By the way, if you notice there's a few items here. There's a Solution Explorer down here, Team Explorer, Properties. I want to hide them. I just unclick that. This one you should probably stay fixed, this toolbox. If it's not available for you tomorrow in your test, you need to go View and then Toolbox. Yes?
Not available, but it covers that application. How do I get it snapped like yours?
You got to, yeah. So what you want to do is, if this thing covers half your page and you want it to dock over here,
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to drag and drop it. We'll do it at the break. You can undock it, and then from there you can put it back, right? There's also a way of resetting your default page. There's almost like you have a default layout that comes out with your page, and you can also do that by going to, I believe, Tools, Options, and then from here you have a blue layout, and I think there's a place down here where you can reset to defaults. And if you do that, everything resets, which may be a good thing and may be a bad thing. Okay. So here's your form. I want to rename this thing. How do I do it again? I just say I do it. So I go to Properties. Remember, Properties. This box here, this big panel, this big Properties panel. These are all the available properties in listed order, in alphabetical order here, for every control. So if I say on the exam tomorrow, change this property, to this value, I mean go to here on design view, go to this property, and inside the value, there's kind of key value pairs, right? So here's my property, and here's the value for the property, right? And these two columns, right? So what I want you to do is go to the property and change the value that I tell you to change. So here I'm asking you to change the text property. That's what you're changing when you want to do the title bar. The text property of the form itself, the actual form, you change this to make it whatever you want. In this particular case, we're going to call it input form to match what it's called, input space form. I'm going to save. What's the other thing I frequently like to tell you to do with forms? There's one more thing, huh? The output? No. What I want you to do is the start position. I always want you to change the start position, because right now, if I run this thing, the start position starts off way over here, which is ugly, and I'd like you to start your forms off in the middle. How do we do that? If I say start the form in the center of the screen, what does that mean? It means, yeah, look at your properties, find something that says start position, and inside there's a Windows default location. I want you to change that thing to center screen. All right, so that changes. So if I run it now, it does this. Okay, so there we are. There's the first thing you do, right? So there's your center form. Okay, I want you to change the size of your form now. I want you to change it to 500 by 500. How do I do that? How do I change my form to 500 by 500? Where? Size, okay. Here's my size, it's 300 by 300. How do I do that? I could click the plus. I could also type it in. If I click the plus, it gives me these individual values here because size is actually a container itself, and size has two properties, width and height. And what I can do is it's actually a little class. And what I'm going to do is if I can do it here in the line, so I can actually do 500 by 500 up here, right? I could do this, or I'll put this back. I could do it here. If I do it in here underneath, I can change each one individually, so 500, and then it'll change up top by 500, let's just say. And then that makes my form the size that I want. So if I tell you to change the size of your form, that's where you're going to do it. You're going to change your size right there. Okay? So again, each property of every control is going to be here the way it is. Okay, that's my form is 500 by 500. Cool. I want you to add a label. And on the left-hand side, there's some common controls here. So here's some instructions, some training for tomorrow. I want you to add a label to the form, and I want you to call that label name or full name. Full name is what's going to be in there. So how do I do that? If I want the label, the actual text in the label to show full name, and I want to put it on the form, what do I do? Tell me. Grab the label from here on the left-hand side, drag and drop it here on the form somewhere. I'm just put it in a random location right now. And now I want you to change this, what it says in here, label 1 to first name or full name. Okay, so where? Text property. All right, so I go to the text property here, and you notice it says label 1. That's what it says. I want to change this. Let's make it first name. First space name. Okay, I've got a first name here. I want you to change the font size. I want you to change font size. Where do I go? Font, right? I go to the font property. There's a couple of things you can do here. If I actually open it up like this, I can actually see so this little plus button here, I actually see the sizes and the name of my font, which is actually the font family right here, right? So if I want to change my size of my font to 14, let's say as an example, I'm going to change this to 14, right? Okay, so my label automatically resizes. It's 14 now, right? And by the way, I can make it bold by changing the bold property to true, right? If I want to make this bold. If I actually minimize this again or collapse it again and go into this little ellipses here on the top right or next to the font, if I click onto this, it'll give me a little dialog box, this little dialog box right here, which will allow you to do all the font stuff all together, right? So you can choose your font type, your size and all that with the little ellipses here, right? Which is totally fine as well. I'm going to make this regular again, so I don't want to make it bold. Press OK. Okay, cool. That's cool for the font, the first name. Is there something I should do with this label? Because, I should probably change the label itself, the ID for the label, right? So where do I do that? Top, right? Way at the top it says name in these round brackets here, right? These parentheses. I want to change the name, and whatever I change the name to here is accessible in the code, right? So remember, I'm talking here about design view. We're in design view right now. There's runtime view. When I click this plus button and I start debugging, that's runtime view. And when I start debugging, it's the code that runs everything outside of my design. Okay, so here's my name. I want to change this. What should I really name this by our conventions that we've talked about over the last week or so? First name label, all caps. So, or camel case, upper camel case. So it's first, capital F, name, capital E, or name, capital N, and then label. I want you to put the label in there because we know it's a label that way, and we can differentiate between first name TextBox or something like that. God, I'm giving you kind of a preview of what I'm going to put in next, right? Okay, here's my first name. label, and then this is cool and all that. But I want to put a text box in there now. What do? I drag and drop, not to keep you in suspense. Drag and drop a text box. And these little smart guides, see these little blue guides here? What are they? What do they do? What do they tell me? Well, there's little, it tells you, yeah, how to align this text box. So here's my text box. If I align it to the top, that means my text box will be aligned to the top of the line height of the label based on the label's font size. If I go to the bottom, it's going to be the bottom of the label. If I try and go in the middle, it's hard. It won't allow me to do that right here. But let's put it to the top for now, okay? So I'm aligned to the top. Now, it's a little off, don't you see? Right? Okay, we'll fix that in a second. Let's change this text box here. I want it to be of font size 14, just like this thing. So I'm going to go into my my fonts. This time I'm going to click the ellipses, and I'm going to change my font size to 14. Oh, hey, that looks a little better now. That's almost aligned perfectly from what it looks like. Let me see this here. It's left aligned. Oh, there's this little red button that comes out. What is this little red, this little red guide? What does little red guide mean? There's red guides and then there's blue guides. What does the red guide mean? Anybody? This is where the text is going to show up. This is good. That means that we're going to show up on the same level. Look at this little blue guide that comes out. It kind of snaps to, watch. Right? See how it snaps to? It snaps to the label. It means it gives it a kind of a default spacing. That's what Microsoft does for us, to snap to the label. All right, so cool. So we got our first name and we got this label. Wow, this label is pretty darn small, eh? So, you know, if I look at this, the text box is pretty small, and right now, from a size perspective, it looks like it's 100 by 29. If I don't know what that is, it's 100 wide by 29 high. 29 is automatically been generated because of the size of my font, right? So you know what? Maybe 100 is not cool. Let's make it 200. So we'll give this a little bit more space for my first name, because some people have longer first name, right? Okay, cool. So here's my first name, 200 points. Maybe that's long enough. Maybe it's not. If you don't feel it's long enough, you can make it longer if you like. Okay. Do I have to do something else to the text box? I name the text box, eh? Because keeping it as text box 1 means absolutely nothing for me, right? So we're going to do this new thing. We're going to say first name, text box, big long name, eh? With capital F, capital N, capital T, capital B. All upper camel case is our convention for controls, right? Which is different than our convention for actual variables in our code. And there's a reason for that, right? We want to keep our variables in our code and our controls and our design looking different, so we can actually differentiate between the two. This is bad. I may have to stop recording at this point, right? I'll stop recording this one.